If you're selected for audit, you'll be expected to include some evidence in your profile which relates to the activities that you're undertaken. And what we've done with evidence here is we divide it into 3 different categories. So it's not quite the same as the activities, so you don't have to include all of these different types of different types of evidence. But just for the purposes of explanation, what we've done is divided it into different types of evidence. So the first type of evidence that you might include is what we call materials from others. Things like certificates, letters from users, carers, students or colleagues. So if you've been on a course, for example, somebody's given you a certificate or perhaps feedback or anything that you've received from someone else, that would be an example of something from another person. The second type of evidence is what we call materials that you've produced yourself, presentations you've given, reports, information leaflets, induction materials for new staff. So obviously, as the name suggests, something you put together yourself. Information leaflets, we mean there really maybe if there's something that you've produced for service users or clients. Materials for new staff, I mean, we've thrown that in there as an example because obviously, as I said already, if you were a manager, then actually developing new induction materials could be a CPD activity. So don't think just about those activities about clinical or frontline practice. The third type of evidence is what we call materials that show you've reflected on and evaluated your learning and work. Could be things like personal development plans, evaluations of courses or conferences attended. This is a little bit where the reflective practice might come in. It's also an area where the evidence that you submit, so you might need to think a little bit more creatively about what you could actually submit. Be absolutely fine to submit, say, diary or journal entries or notes from a meeting. Those kind of things would be absolutely acceptable in terms of evidence. So here are a few of the sort of common concerns or some of the queries that come up from registrants in terms of evidence. So firstly, people ask us, does it need to be signed off? Well, the short answer is no. So if you record activities, that log that you've kept is what you need to supply in terms of the list of activities that you've done. We're not asking anyone else to sign off that in any way. People sometimes ask us, perhaps because of that, how do the CPD assessors know that they've actually done the activity? Well, the important thing to bear in mind with evidence is that we're not really talking about evidence like you'd have in a court of law. So we're not looking for actual proof that something's taken place. Because, as you know, as a registrant, you're bound by the standards of conduct, performance and ethics to act with honesty and integrity, and that includes, indeed, in your dealings with your regulator. So effectively, we expect you to be truthful and to be honest and to tell us actually what you've done. But the activity that we're looking for in terms of evidence, what the assessors are looking to see is some kind of documentation or information that relates to or supports or shows that that activity is taking place. So the assessors effectively trust you that you've done the activities, but the evidence is designed to expand and develop and document on that really. Something else we are asked about is how much evidence people need to keep. Well, I'll talk a bit more about that when I talk about the profile and submitting evidence. But in terms of what you keep in your CPD log on a day-to-day basis, really it's worth bearing in mind that the sort of evidence you need to have should be sufficient if you had to go back and look at the last 2 years and you wanted to reflect on the activities. You probably need to bear in mind that you need to keep sufficient evidence which allows you to be able to reflect back on that activity. So obviously keeping copies of presentations that you've given, conferences that you've attended, those kind of things. But in terms of those sort of more reflective things, think about maybe keeping some kind of log that allows you to record things in a way which would be meaningful if you were to refer back to them as late as in 2 years' time.